At my wedding, my sister tried to sabotage me by spiking my champagne, but I swapped our glasses. When she toasted, she collapsed into the cake. My $10,200 wedding cake was entirely destroyed, yet it was the finest money I've spent. Why? Because laying in that brilliant crimson mess was my own sister, preparing to fall asleep. She had purposefully drugged me during my wedding to make me a drunken disaster in front of my affluent in-laws. I allowed her to get her way, but at a far larger cost. A delicate glass switch and a phony grin produced the most wonderful sight of my life. My beautiful sister has collapsed amidst the crumbs of crimson velvet. But, in order to understand why my own sister intended to destroy my big day, I need to take you back through the preparations. I was Charlotte, 31 years old, and worked as a marketing director for a respected corporation in Charleston. I had always prided myself on being self-assured and sensible. My younger sister Emily, 29, referred to herself as an influencer, which was a fancy term for being unemployed and living a fake existence on social media. What she did not reveal to her 15,000 followers was the $60,000 credit card debt she had been concealing from our parents. My parents, Richard and Deborah, had always preferred Emily. Always. It contradicted every logic, reason, and fairness. It didn't matter whether I got straight A's, scholarships, or job advancements. Emily might share a selfie with an encouraging statement taken from Pinterest, which her mother would frame. Emily's jealousy peaked when I became engaged to James. James, an orthopedic surgery resident at the medical institution, was clever and caring, with hands capable of reconstructing broken bones and a grin that made my heart skip a beat. What truly drove Emily into a tailspin was his last name, not his career or personality. James is from old Charleston money, the sort of family whose forefathers signed key documents and had ships named after them. The kind of family that is still invited to garden parties at historic estates, and the kind of family Emily urgently wanted to meet. During the wedding preparations, she became a complete nightmare. It began 3 months before the wedding. I was sitting at my apartment, studying vendor contracts, when Emily unexpectedly arrived. She strolled in wearing yoga pants that cost more than most people's monthly grocery budget, and she was carrying a fancy purse that I knew she could not afford. "I've been thinking," she stated, without bothering to say hello. "I should be your maid of honor." I looked up from my spreadsheet. "Emily, I already asked Rachel, your lawyer friend?" She wrinkled her nose, as if she had smelled something bad. "Charlotte, this is a wedding with old money elements. Do you really want someone who wears pantsuits to everything standing next to you in photos that will be in the society pages? Rachel is my best friend. She's been there for me through everything. And I'm your sister." Emily's voice took on the petulant edge that I was all too familiar with. "Your only sister. What will people think if your own flesh and blood isn't your maid of honor? It'll look like we're estranged. It'll look bad for both of us. Besides, I need this, Charlotte. Do you know how good this will be for my brand? A wedding at the historic Charleston Hotel? With James's family? I could gain thousands of followers. I should have said no right away. I should have kept my ground." But then she phoned her mother. 2 hours later, both our parents arrived at my door. Mother was already wiping her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. And father wore his disappointed face, which he'd honed over decades of making me feel bad for simply existing. "Charlotte, sweetheart," mother replied, grasping my hands in her own. "Emily is devastated. Absolutely devastated. She feels like you don't love her." "That's not... I never said that. I just wanted... Your sister is going through a difficult time right now," father interjected, his voice bearing the authoritative tone he used when the topic was ended before it began. "The least you can do is include her in your special day, make her feel valued." "Just indulge your sister," mother said, caressing my hand. "Don't make her sad. It's one day, Charlotte. Surely you can be generous for one day." The manipulation was textbook. They'd been doing this all my life, making Emily's emotions my responsibility and her happiness my burden. "Fine," I responded. The word tasted like ash. "You can be the maid of honor." Emily shrieked and clapped her hands. Mother was beaming. Father nodded in approval. When I contacted Rachel to break the news, she remained silent for a long time. "Next. Are you sure about this, Char?" "No," I confessed. "But it's easier than fighting them all." "Easier isn't always better." She was correct, of course. But I had already made my first error. I had already nodded in accord. I had no idea that this compromise had laid the groundwork for Emily's most heinous scheme. Emily emailed me 2 weeks before the wedding. "Need you to pay for my bridesmaid dress. I'm a little short this month." Without consulting me, she picked a $2,200 silk gown from a store that needed appointments and offered champagne during fittings. When I recommended more cheap alternatives for the bridesmaids, she laughed. "You're marrying into old money, Charlotte. We can't look cheap in the photos." What would James's family think? I transferred the money without arguing. Looking back, standing in that ballroom with the knowledge of what she had planned for me, I can see everything plainly. Every demand, every manipulation, and every time our parents forced me to swallow my desires in order to feed her ego had led up to this point. Emily didn't only want to be in my wedding. She intended to destroy it. And I nearly let her. The Charleston Historic Hotel ballroom exemplified Southern grandeur. Crystal chandeliers shed warm light on circular tables covered in ivory silk, with each centerpiece featuring a waterfall of white flowers and trailing ivy. The wooden flooring shined, reflecting the light from hundreds of candles. At the far end of the room, on its own table, stood the centerpiece, which had cost me more than most people's monthly rent. Wedding cake. 7 levels of crimson velvet perfection, each coated in white fondant and adorned with edible gold leaf that reflected light like dispersed stars. Handmade sugar flowers, peonies, roses and gardenias cascaded down one side in a stunning demonstration of the baker's skill. It cost $10,200. And it was definitely worth every penny, just not for the reasons I had anticipated. I sat at the head table, precisely where I had marked on my meticulously made seating chart. As a marketing director, I understand the power of a picture, the significance of angles, and how a photograph can either tell a narrative or damage a brand. I had spent hours arranging this arrangement. James sat to my left, devastatingly attractive in his fitted tuxedo, his black hair neatly combed, and his palm warm against mine on the white tablecloth. Emily sat to my right, dressed in a champagne-colored silk gown that undoubtedly cost more than she'd confess, with her hair in an exquisite updo that must have taken hours. Next to James stood Brian, his closest friend and head groomsman, a cardiologist with an easy grin and a solid demeanor that made him ideal for the position. I had advised the hotel workers precisely about this arrangement. Husband on the left meant that practically every photo of us as a couple showed us facing each other. My face aspect was usually pleasing. The lighting would highlight my looks brilliantly. I thought I had prepared for everything. The hotel presented us with identical crystal champagne flutes, with no engravings or identifying signs. They caught the candlelight, the bubbles rising in lovely golden streams through the pricey vintage that James's family had given them for the toast. The main dish had just been swept away, herb-crusted lamb with roasted vegetables, beautifully presented. The crew walked quickly between tables with the quiet clink of Chinese silverware producing a refined symphony. Conversation buzzed around us, interrupted by bursts of laughter from James's college mates at table 7. James leaned close to my ear, his breath warm on my skin. "Did you see Uncle Richard trying to flirt with your great-aunt Miriam? I think he's had too much wine." I turned entirely to my left to look at him, laughing, and rotated my body to face my new spouse. In my peripheral vision, I noticed Emily's hand moving to my right. Her hand glided across the table with practiced ease, reaching as if to adjust my place card, which had slid slightly throughout supper. A very benign gesture. Helpful even. But when her palm brushed over my champagne flute, it tilted. Only slightly. The colorless liquid from the little glass vial she held in her palm spilled into my glass and immediately dissolved into the bubbles. The carbonation obscured everything, leaving no color shift, trace or indication that anything had altered. She drew her hand back immediately, fixing my place card with a pleased smile. She assumed no one noticed, but Emily had forgotten about Rachel. My best buddy from law school sat at the VIP table immediately across from us, with a wonderful view of the head table. Emily had been so concentrated on me and James, making sure we didn't see her little trick, that she'd totally disregarded the lady with a criminal defense lawyer's eye for detail, and the intuition of someone who had spent years researching how people commit crimes. Rachel had seen everything. Gliding hand. The falling liquid. Emily smirked. My phone, which was face up on the table next to my champagne flute, buzzed. Bzzzt. The sound was slight, hidden in the background commotion of 200 guests rejoicing. But I felt it and seen the screen light up with an incoming message. I cast a downward gaze. Rachel sent an iMessage. 5 brief words. All uppercase letters. Swap your glasses. She drugged it. My heart has stopped. Actually halted, then restarted with a severe thump in my throat, chest and fingertips. The world tilted slightly, the chandelier light suddenly too brilliant, and the sounds around me were too loud. I froze, with every muscle in my body freezing in place. However, years of client presentations, high-stakes meetings and maintaining cool when campaigns failed or executives panicked all had an impact. My face stayed calm. Neutral. Perhaps a little apprehensive, as any bride might be reading a text at her reception, but nothing more. I looked up slowly and deliberately, catching Rachel's eye across the room. She gave me a slight nod. Decisive. Certain. She was certain she had seen it. I gazed down at the champagne flute in front of me. The golden liquid glittered innocently, with bubbles rising in those exquisite streams. It looked just like James's, Brian's and Emily's glasses. But it wasn't. This was no longer your typical sibling jealousy. This was not Emily pitching a fit, making demands, or wailing to our parents. This was a premeditated, targeted attack intended to harm my reputation in front of my husband's family. She'd planned it. I had been waiting for the proper moment. She asked me to drink that glass. They wanted me to become bewildered, confused, and sloppy. Did she want James's family, the aristocratic old money family she was so infatuated with, to witness me humiliate myself? To view their new daughter-in-law as a drunk, as someone unsuitable for their son, someone who couldn't control her booze at her own wedding, the people-pleaser in me, the one who'd spent 31 years suppressing my feelings and accommodating Emily's outbursts when our parents required that I make her happy, that version of Charlotte perished. I knew I had to act, exchange the glasses, and turn Emily's plot against her. But she was right there, less than 2 feet away, staring at both champagne flutes like a hawk at prey. I sat paralyzed in my chair, acutely aware of every detail. The weight of my phone in my hand, the condensation collecting on the outside of the poisoned champagne flute, and Emily's rapid and enthusiastic breathing beside me, expecting her win. She was studying those glasses, both of them, and I couldn't move or act while she was looking at them. I needed an opportunity. A diversion. I sat there, pulse beating, and waited. James grabbed my hand, mistaking my tenseness for wedding day anxiety. "Are you okay?" he said softly. "Perfect," I said, the untruth slick and prepared. Then fate sent me the most strong lady I'd ever known. I overheard it. The click of heels against hardwood. Expensive heels. The sort that cost more than some people's vehicle payments. The sound came from behind us, in the direction of the VIP waiting room, a special location allocated by the hotel for immediate family members to use for touch-ups and peaceful moments. The door opened. Mrs. Margaret walked outside. James's mother was a force of nature with a 5'6" stature. Her Oscar de la Renta gown, blue silk with elaborate beading that probably cost more than my vehicle, suited her well. Her silver hair was arranged into a beautiful chignon, and diamond earrings caught the light. She had certainly touched up her cosmetics, as her lips were now a new shade of classic red. She moved along the back row of chairs, just behind the head table. Click, click, click. During the brief gap between meals, the sound of her heels could be heard above the muted talk. I felt Emily stiffen next me. If there was one thing my sister couldn't pass up, it was the chance to impress someone important, and Mrs. Margaret was the most important person at this wedding, the matriarch of a family whose name appeared on buildings and scholarship funds, and whose opinion could open or close doors for good. Emily's head snapped around so quickly, I'm amazed she didn't suffer whiplash. She virtually sprang out of her chair, jumping right into Mrs. Margaret's path with the glee of a golden dog greeting its owner after a long day. "Oh, Mrs. Margaret." Emily's voice rose an octave, oozing with fake sweetness. "Were you resting in the VIP room too? I hope the reception isn't too overwhelming for you. I know these events can be absolutely exhausting, especially with so many people wanting your attention." She had fully turned her back on the meal. To me. To the glasses. Rachel's letter flared brightly in my mind. Swap your glasses. This was it. My only opportunity. My hand slid to the base of both champagne flutes. My fingers were steady. Years of handling delicate presenting materials had given me accuracy that I hadn't appreciated until now. I didn't lift the glasses. That would be too blatant and conspicuous, even with Emily's back turned. Someone could see. A guest, a server. Even James if he chanced to look down. Instead, I slipped them. Meanwhile, my sister's words reverberated behind me. "I must say," Emily said, reaching out to softly touch the sleeve of Mrs. Margaret's robe without waiting for a response. "This Oscar de la Renta dress was absolutely born for you. The beading, the cut, it's perfection. You have the most incredible eye for fashion. I was just telling Charlotte earlier how elegant you looked. Simply elegant." The The silk tablecloth was excellent for this pricey, silky, with just enough friction to govern but not oppose movement. I gently pressed on the bottoms of both glasses, pushing my drugged glass toward Emily's position and dragging her clean glass toward mine. They slid over the cloth like figure skaters on ice, hardly 1 millimeter above the surface, the liquid within scarcely rippling. Swish. I turned the new glass slightly in my position so that Emily's small lipstick trace on the rim faced away from where she'd been seated. The entire procedure took 5 seconds, which was precisely how long it took Emily to finish her effusive remark on the clothing and begin discussing how much she liked Mrs. Margaret's charity work with the Children's Hospital. No one noticed. The waiters were at the far end of the ballroom and the guests were preoccupied with their own talks. James was watching his Uncle Richard, who had cornered my great-aunt Miriam near the bar. But Rachel noticed. I cast a peek at the VIP table. She was holding her wine glass, but her gaze was on me. When our gazes met, the corner of her mouth rose in a little grin. She raised her glass fractionally, making a toast that only I could see. My network of sympathizers had worked flawlessly, and I was confident Rachel would not take her gaze away from my sister for the remainder of the evening. She'd observe. She was going to document. She would be ready. Mrs. Margaret moved away from Emily's gaze with the ease of someone who had dealt with social climbers for decades. "How kind of you to say so, dear. If you'll excuse me, I should return to my table." She slid away, leaving a cloud of costly perfume behind. Emily returned to her seat, virtually bouncing into it, her cheeks flushed with triumph. She believed she'd just scored significant points with my mother-in-law, that she'd had a good networking moment that would be perfect for an Instagram story later. She took a quick peek at the table. The 2 champagne flutes remained just as they had before she turned around. Similar postures, fullness, and the innocent dazzle of golden bubbles. Her gaze was drawn to them for a brief while before moving away. "There is no suspicion. Don't be concerned." Why should there be? They seemed similar. And her arrogance, her total belief that she'd outwitted me, that her strategy was immaculate, had destroyed any desire to double-check. She grabbed for the glass in front of her. The drugged person. Her smile was poisoned and victorious. "Come now," she continued, bringing the crystal flute toward me. "Let's toast to your happiness, Charlotte." I raised my clean glass, pushing my face to form a grin full of concealed meaning. Every ounce of satisfaction, every piece of delayed justice, every year of being instructed to appease her, I poured into that smile. "Thank you, sister," I whispered quietly. "For a night we will not forget." The crystal flutes produced a crisp, clean chime that echoed over our part of the table. Clink. Emily lifted the glass to her lips and drank deeply, her gaze fixed on mine above the rim. She felt she was watching her plan develop, that she was witnessing the start of my demise. I sipped my clean champagne while watching her swallow her own sentence. The colorless liquid melatonin, in whatever amount she had prepared for me, flowed down her throat alongside the pricey vintage champagne. She sighed contentedly and placed down her glass, smiling. I grinned back. And waited. Following the toast, I made my move. I had to sell it. Emily had to be convinced that her strategy was functioning just as she had intended. So I became silent. I shifted slightly away from the table chat, allowing my smile to dissolve into something more neutral, quiet. When James inquired about the dessert serving schedule, I responded in soft, imprecise language. Brian attempted to involve me in a joke about the worst wedding speeches they'd seen in medical school, but I only managed a feeble laugh. Emily noticed right away. I could feel her gaze on me, the way she came in closer, scanning my face for indications of the pills taking effect. I gave her what she wanted. A bride who became quieter, detached, and inattentive. Her mouth twitched up. She believed it was working. I thought I was starting to feel the melatonin's effects, that in a few more minutes I'd be stumbling, slurring, and embarrassing myself in front of 200 guests and James's entire family. She reclined back in her chair, virtually quivering with excitement, and her confidence grew with each minute. But Emily didn't understand, because her self-absorption prevented her from seeing it, that the medicines were already in her system, being absorbed into her bloodstream and making their way to her brain. The MC's voice crackled across the speakers, smooth and polished. "Ladies and gentlemen, we now invite the best man to say a few words." The ballroom fell silent, conversations fading as attendees focused on the little stage area near the cake table. Brian arose, buttoning his jacket with a casual grin. I checked the time and the evening was running just on track, just past 8 p.m. He approached the microphone and for the next several minutes the entire crowd laughed. Stories about James's awful cooking at their shared apartment during residency. James once unintentionally wore mismatched shoes to a formal hospital presentation. Brian knew James was serious about me when he started doing his laundry rather than purchasing new clothing when he ran out of clean ones. The time was excellent. Brian's speech produced a buffer, a period of time when all attention was diverted elsewhere, allowing Emily's tiny changes in her physique to go unnoticed in the ballroom. I observed her out of the corner of my eye. She was still smiling and acting her part as the supporting maid of honor. But I saw something, the way she shifted slightly in her seat. Her fingers came up to lightly touch her temple, creating a slight wrinkle between her brows. The melatonin was beginning to act. Melatonin in liquid form operates quicker than in tablets, entering swiftly into the circulation. Emily would feel it now, a slight heaviness in her limbs and a delicate fuzziness seeping into her mind. But she'd mistake it for anxiousness over her imminent speech, or maybe the champagne had struck a little harder than intended. She wouldn't suspect the truth. Brian concluded his statement, arousing applause, and returned to his seat, patting James on the shoulder as he passed. James stood to hug his closest buddy, and the two of them experienced a moment that made the photographer's camera flash many times. The MC returned to the mic. "Thank you, Brian. Now we'd like to hear from the maid of honor." The time had arrived. Emily stood. I paid close attention to her and remembered every detail. She had to support herself temporarily with one hand on the table. The little hesitation before she got out of her chair, as if gathering her coordination, and the forced cheerfulness in her countenance that didn't quite reach her eyes. She assumed it was nervousness. I assumed it was the inherent anxiousness of public speaking, but I knew better. The medications were taking effect, giving her that familiar lightheaded sensation and making her limbs feel heavy and detached. In another 10 minutes, she'd be struggling to keep her eyes open. But for now, in this moment, she had enough clarity and diluted confidence to feel she was in command. She moved toward the stage area, her strides perhaps a little slower than usual but steady enough, and she went straight for the place she'd most likely selected for days, exactly next to the cake tower. Of course she did. The $10,200 red velvet creation, complete with edible gold leaf and handcrafted sugar flowers, would serve as the ideal backdrop for the images she planned to share later. The pricey cake would represent riches, position, and ties to old money. It would be visual confirmation that she had made it and was now a part of this world. She positioned herself as near to the cake table as possible, possibly closer than the catering crew preferred. Her left hand carried a recently replenished wine glass, while her right hand received the MC's wireless microphone. That gorgeous, perilous wireless microphone, which would broadcast every word to the whole ballroom via the excellent sound system James's family had paid extra for. Emily didn't think about it. She had not considered what would happen if she lost control of her words, if the drugs in her system caused her to be truthful and unrestrained. She simply smiled at the throng and began to talk. "Good evening, everyone," she said, her voice wonderfully enhanced by the speakers. "For those who don't know me, I'm Emily, Charlotte's sister and maid of honor." Her speech were crisp and controlled, but I could see the effort she expended, the way she stood just a little too still, as if she was trying not to wobble. "I've known Charlotte my entire life, obviously, and I have to say," she paused for emphasis, playing to the audience, "it's been quite a journey watching her find someone worthy of her." The guests laughed politely. Charlotte has always been the responsible one, the organized one, the one with the perfect plans and the perfect career. There was an edge to her voice now, something harsh behind the syrupy sweetness, and she now had the perfect spouse from the ideal family. I sat beneath the stage, my hand finding James's and gripping hard. He squeezed back. He had no clue what was about to happen. Neither of them did. Emily raised her wine glass slightly, and the liquid caught the light. "So, here's to Charlotte," she added, her smile big, artificial, and venomous. "To my perfect sister and her perfect life." The audience applauded, lifting their glasses in return. But I sat there, watching and waiting. Waiting for the melatonin to strike full force. Waiting for karma to strike. Waiting for my sister to collapse. The acclaim for my speech was still reverberating across the ballroom when Emily raised her wine glass, a practiced smile spreading over her features. She produced a faultless portrayal as the beloved sister, the courteous bridesmaid, and the embodiment of family togetherness. But I knew better. I had always known better. She addressed my sister and her new husband, her voice bearing the theatrical lilt she had honed for her Instagram videos. "May your marriage be everything mine will be someday." The audience murmured their agreement. James's hand found mine beneath the table, his fingers warm and solid. Emily took a long, victorious sip from my original crystal flute, which she had meticulously doctored. The shift was not immediate. She lowered the glass, still smiling and acting her role. But then I saw it. Her stance was somewhat wobbly, and her free hand groped for the platform as if the floor had changed beneath her feet. "Thank you all for—" Her words were muddled. She blinked quickly, her eyelids becoming thick. The crystal flute shook in her hands. Rachel leaned near to me, her speech barely audible. "How much did she use? How much did she use?" "I don't know," I said, "but judging by how fast it's hitting her, a lot more than the recommended dose." She swayed significantly, her knuckles white as she grasped the microphone stand. The entire ballroom had gone silent, with 300 visitors watching as my sister's well-crafted veneer disintegrated in real time. "Why?" Her puzzled and terrified voice rang out across the speakers. "Why is the ceiling spinning?" The wine glass slid from her grasp first. It dropped through the air in slow motion, the crystal catching the light before shattering against the stage floor. The sound was harsh and final, like a gunshot amid the sudden quiet. Emily's legs finally gave up entirely. She leaned forward, her right hand still grasping the microphone in a death grip, as if that little bit of metal might somehow connect her to awareness. Her body moved with the dreadful weight of lifeless gravity, with no attempt to catch herself and no defensive instinct remaining in her drugged system. The consequences were disastrous. Boom. 7 layers of red velvet wedding cake, $10,200 in handmade beauty, each with gold leaf decorations and exquisite sugar flowers, burst on touch. Emily's face was hit first, followed by her entire torso, and her $2,200 bridesmaid dress plunged into the debris like a diver entering water. Instead of water, there was buttercream icing, cake crumbs, and the rich crimson inside of red velvet layers. The sight was frightening. The combination of white cream and scarlet cake had a shockingly similar appearance to a murder scene. My sister lay still in the carnage, her golden blonde hair caked with icing and her ivory. It appeared that she had been mercilessly clothing ruined beyond recognition, demolished in front of 300 witnesses. My mother's cry shattered the air. "Emily." But James had already moved. His doctor's skills kicked in before anybody else could comprehend what had occurred. He was on stage in seconds, his tuxedo forgotten as he fell on his knees near the cake disaster. "Someone cut the music," he demanded, his voice calm but firm. The jazz trio became quiet instantly. James worked quickly, his hands moving with great accuracy. He grasped Emily's shoulder and forcibly moved her onto her side to free her airway, wiping away the thick layer of buttercream from her nose and mouth. I saw my husband check her pulse at her neck before lifting her eyelids to examine her pupils, his countenance darkening with each examination. The whole ballroom held its breath. Brian stood still at the head table. Margaret had her hand placed to her heart. My father was plowing through the crowd, his face paler. The motion of being rolled over appeared to startle Emily. Her fingers remained wrapped around the microphone, the wireless gadget dragging across her chin while James positioned her. In her stupor, her eyes flashed open, unfocused and unseeing. She stared squarely at James, but I could tell she wasn't seeing him. "No." The word came out broken and hardly audible, but the microphone, now placed just next to her lips, caught it up precisely. Her voice resonated over the ballroom speakers, distorted and feeble. "Wrong glass." The drugged glass? The confession lingered in the air like smoke. Time appeared to freeze. Everyone in the ballroom had heard it. The words were garbled, muddled, and undeniable. Wrong glass. Drugged glass. The inference was clear. James's hands remained immobile. He gently raised his head, shifting his focus from Emily's comatose figure to my parents, who were now standing at the edge of the stage. His look was as icy as I had ever seen it. "She isn't having a stroke," he stated, his words crisp and professional. "This is a synergistic toxicity. Alcohol potentiating a central nervous system depressant. These are classic symptoms of a sedative overdose." My mother made a coughing noise. "What? No, that's not. She wouldn't." James took out his phone and dialed 911, quickly explaining the issue to the operator in medical language before hanging up. My father has finally found his voice. "This is ridiculous. Emily would never, there must be some mistake." James finished the conversation and rose, towering over both of my parents. The expression he gave them might have frozen fire. "You two will accompany her to the hospital. I will not call the police tonight." He hesitated, and I noticed something menacing in his eyes. "But if anything else happens, if there's even one more incident, I can't promise that same courtesy." The threat wasn't hidden. My father, who had spent my whole childhood bulldozing everyone with his thoughts and demands, took a step back. He opened his lips briefly before closing it again, thoroughly silenced by James's tremendous dominance. The ambulance arrived in minutes, a benefit of being in downtown Charleston. Emily was placed onto a gurney by paramedics, her face still plastered with icing and cake crumbs, and her clothing was beyond repair. My mother went into the ambulance without saying anything, her face contorted in that familiar grimace of sacrificial anguish. My father stood at the ballroom door, staring back at me with something I couldn't read. Accusation? Guilt? Fear? I met his eyes steadfastly, unwilling to turn away or give him the comfort of my acquiescence. Then he was gone, as the ambulance drove away into the Charleston night. The ballroom was chaotic, with visitors mumbling in surprised groups, hotel personnel frozen in disbelief, and the shattered cake, a crimson testament to the evening's calamity. I stood at the head table, James's hand in mine, and felt an unexpected sensation sweep over me. Relief. Pure, uncomplicated comfort. Rachel arrived at my side, holding up her phone like a trophy. "I recorded the whole thing," she said, her criminal lawyer instincts as keen as ever, both the fall and the confession. "Audio is crystal clear." She tapped the screen, and Emily's groggy voice came back. "Wrong glass." "The drugged glass?" Several close visitors heard it, and the muttering became more intense. I saw the truth spread through the gathering like a stone thrown into quiet water. My sister, the golden child and cherished youngest daughter, had just admitted to attempting poisoning in front of 300 witnesses. The hunter has become prey. Margaret approached us, her Oscar de la Renta gown looking pristine despite the turmoil. She stared at the smashed cake, then at me, her face inscrutable. "Well," she eventually remarked, with a dry humor in her tone, "this is certainly the most memorable wedding I've ever attended." The hotel manager appeared, wringing his hands. "Mrs. Ashford, I am so terribly sorry about this incident. Should we end the reception, given the circumstances?" I stared at the shattered cake, red velvet crumbs spread across the stage as proof of violence, white icing smeared across the floor, the gorgeous 7-tier masterpiece reduced to rubble, $10,200 in destroyed creativity. And all I felt was light. I glanced to James and his blue eyes searched mine, anxious but not sympathetic. "How are you doing?" he inquired calmly. "This is the first time I've seen you breathe easy since we got engaged," he added before I could respond. He was correct. For months I'd been walking on eggshells, attempting to manage my family's expectations and avoid exactly this type of situation. I bought for Emily's outfit, involved her in every detail, and went to great lengths to maintain the peace. Yet she still tried to drug me. What about now? Now the beast had been driven away. I looked at the hotel manager and smiled naturally, rather than the one I'd been practicing all night. "Clean it up. Bring out more wine and whatever desserts the hotel has in the kitchen. The night has only just begun." The manager blinked. You want to continue?" "This is my wedding reception," I said, "and I'm going to celebrate with the people who actually care about me." Something changed in the room after that. The guests who had come out of duty, my parents' acquaintances, and the society matrons who had come to make an appearance, all left quietly. But who remained? They were ours. James's medical school classmates, my work pals Rachel and Brian, Margaret, and the family members who had taken the time to get to know us. The jazz quartet resumed playing, the hotel served trays of chocolate tortas and lemon tarts, and someone opened more champagne. Without the weight of my family's criticism, the greeting became more real. I danced with James under the chandeliers, his arms around my waist, and I felt the stress I'd been dragging around for years suddenly let go. "No regrets?" "No," he said softly against my hair. I said, "None," and meant it. Rachel caught my eye from across the dance floor as she raised her champagne flute in a silent toast. She had been warning me about my family for several years. Tonight, she had been proven correct in the most dramatic way conceivable. The next morning, as sunshine streamed through the hotel suite windows, my phone vibrated with a text message from my mother. "How could you let this happen? Emily only did it because she felt left out. She felt pressured seeing you enter such a wealthy family. She made a mistake. You need to forgive her. Family is family." I read it again, feeling the usual remorse begin to take hold. The old Charlotte, who had spent 31 years attempting to win her parents' affection, would have responded. Would have apologized. I would have found a way to make it her fault. However, Charlotte had died sometime between the glass switch and the cake destruction. I erased the mail without replying. I then blocked the number. James observed me from his bed, understanding without asking. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, realizing that was correct. "I really am." I banned my father's phone number next. Then Emily's. I removed the links that had held me captive to their toxicity my whole life, one by one. No more money transfers to pay Emily's debts. No more guilt-inducing phone calls. No longer playing the part of the disappointed daughter. Freedom had a saline and clear flavor, similar to the Charleston morning air. A year later, James accompanied me to Charleston Medical for a pregnancy visit. I was 8 months pregnant, my tummy full and solid beneath my sundress. The ultrasound technician grinned as she passed the wand over my skin. "Everything looks perfect," she remarked. "Your baby girl is healthy and growing right on schedule. A daughter." James's hand clenched around mine, his eyes filled with unshed tears. We'd been talking about this moment for months, about the sort of parents we wanted to be and the type of family we wanted to have. "No golden child," I replied gently, repeating the vow we'd made to one another. "Every child is equal," James agreed. "Always." We drove home via the historic area, passing antebellum houses and Spanish moss-covered oak trees. My phone, with its new number and contacts, sat silently in my handbag. My mother had attempted to contact me through common contacts, leaving notes expressing her desire to make apologies and be involved in her grandchild's life. I had not reacted. Some bridges, once burnt, should remain in ashes. That evening I sat on our back porch with my laptop, writing a post for the online forum where I'd been chronicling my experiences. The wedding tragedy had been too magnificent to keep entirely quiet. Strong views. "I need your thoughts on a few things," I typed, "because my family refuses to leave me alone, and I need other perspectives." Question 1. Was I being too severe in switching the glasses? My mother feels a decent sister would have just put the wine away rather than allowing Emily to damage herself. Question 2. Emily ruined a $10,200 cake. Should I sue her in civil court for compensation, or should I regard it as tuition for her life lesson? Question 3. Do you agree with me that it is better to lose $10,200 to get rid of toxic individuals than to keep a phony, flawless wedding? Kindly leave a remark. I pressed the publish button and closed the laptop. Inside, James was making dinner while humming jazz music. About the glass, I could see him moving about our kitchen, house, and existence, which was based on honesty rather than manipulation. My kid kicked, causing a solid flutter across my rib cage. I touched my palm to the area, experiencing the miracle of new life and fresh beginnings. The wedding cake was ruined. The bridesmaid dress is damaged. My familial relationships were cut. And I have never been happier. The creature was gone. The cage was open. And I was finally totally free.